Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross, in the studio. Joining me this evening is Chris McCusker via Skype. Chris is a long-term member of the team here at Scotland at 7. Welcome, Chris. I hope you're hearing me okay on Skype.
Yeah. I think we've got all the gremlins out the system, Gordon. Thank you.
Excellent, Chris. Excellent. Okay, listen, we're going to jump right in tonight. Of course, coronavirus is in the headlines as usual today, so we're going to give you a regular update on the situation as of today. And as of 2 p.m. today in Scotland, there has been a total of 18,128 Scottish tests concluded, and of these, 15,526 tests were confirmed negative. 2,602 tests were positive. This marks an increase of 292 confirmed cases since yesterday. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection has sadly risen now to 126. The latest UK figures available show that 2,921 patients who tested positive for the COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness. A total of 163,194 people have been tested, of which 129,476 were negative and 33,718 were confirmed positive. So, Chris, the figures are still going up, and again, we just seem to be watching them climb regularly each day now. There seems, though, to be quite a large number of fatalities, particularly in the United Kingdom, the rest of the United Kingdom for some reason. And a few people have been remarking on this, that Germany, for example, has a very low mortality rate. But we'll come to that in a minute. What's your feeling, Chris, about the situation that we're seeing now?
Well, I think that we touched on this last week, and I think that I've made the point, or I think we agreed to the point that the figures last week were exponentially going to rise this week. So whilst the figures make for grim reading, then it's the natural progression of this virus is always going to see the figures rise, on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And I made the point last night to Kenny is that it's a shame that they don't bring out the figures for the people who've actually come through the virus. And
yeah, well, I understand, Chris. Actually, those figures are coming shortly, so we should get some information on that fairly soon, I understand.
Yeah. But I just feel that it can't come quick enough because I think that they would act as a bit of a morale booster for everybody that are. I think
the First Minister said so. I think the First Minister, Chris. I think the First Minister said something about this today as well.
Yeah. She touched on it with the three new points that she introduced on vis-a-vis testing and all the rest of it. So, but again, obviously, it's a time issue, to actually collate all the facts and figures before you can actually come out and quote them. Interestingly, what I've seen on Twitter, Gordon, is quite an awful lot of unionists, not unionists per se, quite a lot of English users on Twitter are actually commenting in awe at how transparent the Scottish Government are compared to the UK.
Okay, well, listen, Chris, I've got another item here which is actually related just to what we were talking about the death toll involved in the virus. Mm-hmm. Apparently, the UK government's worst case scenario envisages a coronavirus death toll of some 50,000 people if self-isolation is not adhered to. But the United Kingdom is not on course for a toll of that scale right now, a source familiar with the government's emergency discussions has told Reuters. According to the source, who spoke on condition of anonymity due to the sensitivity of the issue, the worst day for deaths is projected to be Easter Sunday on April the 12th. A so-called best-case scenario in the circumstances would be a death toll of 20,000, according to the source. Downing Street spokeswoman declined an immediate comment. The United Kingdom's coronavirus death toll rose 24% in one day to 2,921 as of April the 1st. Stephen Powis, the medical director of National Health Service England, said on Sunday that the United Kingdom would be doing well if it kept the coronavirus death toll below 20,000. According to a study by Imperial College last month, if no measures were taken, then the outbreak would have caused more than 500,000 deaths in Britain and 2.2 million in the United States. Worldwide, the coronavirus deaths have reached more than 47,000, according to a Reuters tally. So these figures seem frightening at first glance, Chris. The idea of 50,000 people dying from this virus does seem extremely black indeed. But of course, this is their projected worst case scenario, their best case scenario being 20,000 or less. I mean, even at 20,000, it's still a very, very scary period of time in our history.
It certainly is, and I hate to keep making the point, but I think it's exponentially going to get worse before it gets better. You know that these figures are going to constantly climb and climb and climb until we have get to a stage where it starts to flatten out and we reach the sort of like final plateau before we come over the other side.
Chris, I was just going to say that the World Health Organization 3 days ago published a graph. Unfortunately, we don't have it to show you this evening, but on the graph it showed two potential trajectories for the disease. And in one case, in the best case scenario, which we're on at the moment, the number of people with the disease doubles every 3 days. So on that sort of basis, it's climbing almost in a straight line at the moment. And until it starts to slow down and that line becomes less steep, we won't know if it's plateaued yet.
Yeah. I also, well, I can't remember if it was on the BBC or but they were talking about if
well, it's just
the social distancing. One person could potentially infect two people, and then two people can obviously, potentially affect other two. So it works on some bizarre ratio, and with the advent of digital media and stuff like that, and the constant number crunching and people coming out.
People are getting lost in the figures, aren't they?
That's what I was going to say.
But if we go, Chris, if we just simply return to this sort of headline grabbing phrase of the maximum number of deaths is going to occur on Easter Sunday. I mean, what a time for this to be happening. It's supposed to be a time of celebrations in the Christian world, and it's only 10 days from now.
Yeah, I not being, I class myself as a Christian. I'd no longer partake in the Catholic faith, right enough, but I don't buy into all this mince. About. I mean, I've seen Jewish people saying that this is.
It's just Chris. It's just the dates that we're talking about, really. It just happens to fall at Easter.
The date is actually quite significant because it's tying it into a major date in the Catholic calendar.
Yeah. But it's just an accident of a quirk of fate, Chris, that it happens to be on Easter Sunday. It's just the fact that it's so close. We're only a week and a half away from the maximum. 10 days from now, it's supposed to reach its height.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to point out is the fact that an awful lot of these religious nutters are pointing towards, you know, some sort of
the end of days,
a sign or something like that. I mean,
okay.
You've had people coming out with ridiculous claims of the fact that COVID-19 is because you're not practicing your Christianity, or
Chris, if we can bring it back to normality, these are obviously scientific predictions. They're nothing really to do with religion. It's just an accident. But these are projections based on models, and they're not that precise. I mean, it strikes me that it might go on a lot longer than 10 days from now. We could find a peak much later than that. There is a massive amount of room for error because nobody's ever faced a pandemic on this scale since 1918. And back then they didn't have computer models at all or any way to fight it. However, they have used the data from that time actually to help model for the current crisis. But anyway, flu is obviously not as dangerous as this, is not as transmissible as this particular disease.
Flu can lead to more serious things like influenza and decimated people back in the early 1900s.
Yeah, because the problem is that the flu virus transmits at about half the rate of coronavirus, 1.5 people per person, whereas the coronavirus you can infect 2.5 or 3 people. But anyway, I'm going to bring it back to back to our next item, Chris. They're all related this evening. And this is a new process for reporting COVID-19 deaths has been introduced. The Scottish Government has outlined details of the improved process to report COVID-19 deaths that began today, Thursday, April the 2nd. The Health Protection Scotland has worked out with National Records Scotland to put the new, more efficient procedure in place, which involves cross-checking records between HPS and NRS to identify individuals who have died and have had laboratory-confirmed report of COVID-19. The new system no longer requires manual data returns from health protection teams and will not be dependent upon separate confirmation that the next of kin has been informed of a link with COVID-19. Given that this is now incorporated within the death certification process, this will reduce delays in reporting COVID-19 deaths. As a part of this system, 40 deaths which would not yet have been reported under the old system because next of kin had not been informed have been included and allocated to the last 3 days as appropriate. There is no change in the definition used for to report the deaths of COVID-19 patients, which is defined as an individual who has died and has had a laboratory confirmed report of COVID-19 in the 28 days prior to their death. The data below shows the running total of current deaths reported under the old and new systems. Those confirmed have died from the coronavirus in the last few days. Now, there are now, I beg your pardon, 126 deaths confirmed using the new system. The old data collection approach would have produced lower numbers. So, for example, Tuesday, the 31st of March, there were 60 deaths, Wednesday, 76, Thursday, 86. And under the new system, we have, instead of that, 69 deaths on Tuesday, 97 on Wednesday, and 126 on Thursday. So, although it seems like a steep rise, it is actually just due to the new reporting technique. So, Chris, this seems like a more streamlined version of the system that they've been running until now. We're now hearing of more deaths before the certification has a chance to get to slow things down. So we're hearing about them more quickly now.
Yeah, but I think this goes back to my earlier point that the Scottish Government have been far more transparent than what the English Government is in their COVID-19 updates.
Christopher, forgive me interrupting. I was just going to say, I think the Scottish Government seems to be much more active in trying to be more efficient at reporting the deaths and making sure that they have the figures much more accurately and much more up to date.
Well, I think that, that just shows, as I say, the level that the Scottish Government want to operate at in order to project to the whole of Scotland and the rest of the waiting media that they are being completely honest and upfront, and they're not hiding anything, which is in stark contrast to what we see earlier on. Where possible, I try not to watch the BBC, as you know. But the reports that I'm getting on Twitter about Matt Hancock, his performance at 5 o'clock this afternoon, I think that they obviously got him to re-sign the Official Secrets Act because it seemed to me that he was constantly second guessing everything that he was trying to project.
Okay, Chris, Chris, I'm just going to leave this part of the broadcast just now. Taking our next story, they're all sort of linked together, as I say. The next story this evening is actually about frontline staff being protected from the coronavirus. A new guidance on personal protective equipment, or PPE, has been published for health and social care workers responding to the coronavirus in Scotland. The guidance, which has been agreed by the 4 UK Chief Medical Officers and the Chief Nursing Officers, follows an urgent review of the existing guidance against the latest evidence and the WHO advice on the safest way to protect health and social care staff. The new guidance includes what type of personal protective equipment to use in secondary, primary and community care settings and when to wear it. Also, when clinicians need to wear a higher level of protective equipment and in which settings. And also detailed advice around risk assessing the use of PPE in a range of different clinical scenarios, including community settings, such as care homes and caring for individuals in their own homes. The Health Secretary, Jean Freeman, said protecting staff working on the front line is an absolute priority. And I want to thank each and every one of them for their hard work and their commitment in this incredibly challenging situation. I want our staff to feel as safe as possible, and this updated guidance provides clarity so that health and social care staff caring for patients feel confident in the PPE which they wear in different situations and settings. Scotland's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Catherine Calderwood, said the updates to the guidance reflect the fact that COVID-19 is now widespread in the community. And so health and social care workers are more likely to see patients with the virus, some of whom will not have symptoms yet. We've introduced new measures to improve the distribution of personal protective equipment, including a single point of contact for all health boards to manage local PPE supply and distribution, and an email address for NHS staff to contact if they do not feel they have what they need. This is COVID-19 Health PPE at gov.scot, and it will be monitored continuously and allow us to act to resolve any specific supply issues more quickly. A helpline has also been set up for registered social care providers having problems accessing PPE, with extra staff to prepare orders for social care, additional delivery drivers, longer delivery hours, and the use of more external delivery companies to increase capacity. The work continues to source further PPE to ensure there is an appropriate supply for all our workforce. Now, Chris, I know that as a former union representative, this kind of personal protective equipment is exactly what you would be calling for at a time like this. But this is now giving more detailed advice to the workers who are facing the COVID virus head on which kinds of PPE to wear and when.
Yeah, well, I mean, you'll know yourself from being also a trade union rep that alongside health and safety, the other tool that you have to use is risk assessment and where and when that protective equipment has to be used and to what situation is used in the best effect.
It should also, Chris, I was going to thinking on my feet there, it should also give the health service a better idea of how much PPE is being gone through, because it's a consumable, isn't it? It can only be used once. But it can be used for, I know it can be used for several days, but it has to be disposed of at the end of its life, I would guess, and it will have a finite lifespan.
Yeah, it has to be disposed of at the end of its lifetime, and that's saying the exact same as, you know, any kind of like plastic commodity.
Yeah.
But what the other point that I was going to go on to discuss was obviously the supply chain of the products has to be sufficient in order to sustain the level of the actual stock of PPE. Now, I've seen an article earlier on, and it was highlighting the problems that coronavirus is bringing to the supply chain in the UK, and this was vis-a-vis the haulage contraction business, and also the freight business as well within the superstructure of the UK. And it was saying that an awful lot of the suppliers of general foodstuffs, just for argument's sake, are turning back to using the railways in order to freight their goods from point A to point B.
Chris, listen, I've got to have to stop you there. We're wandering a little bit away from the subject matter, but the next item is closely linked to this, and you'll understand why in a moment. The UK government this week has been urged to publish findings of a 2016 pandemic drill. The Labour Party has called on ministers to publish suppressed conclusions of a cross-government pandemic drill which took place in 2016, which accurately predicted that the NHS would be plunged into crisis by an infectious and deadly disease. Codenamed Exercise Cygnus, the wide-ranging exercise took place in October 2016, but its conclusions have never been made public, even though it highlighted shortages in intensive care beds, vital equipment and even mortuary space. John Ashworth, Labour's health spokesman, accused ministers of not properly preparing the NHS for the coronavirus crisis, despite the exercise 3 years ago. There are serious questions for ministers on what lessons were learned from the Cygnus pandemic drill, which can only be answered by publishing its conclusions and the actions taken as a result, Ashworth said. The Labour frontbencher added, we went into this crisis without enough staff or beds. We have long warned about the critical care bed capacity and the pressures on the NHS after years of financial squeeze. There are only a handful of references to Cygnus in public documents, although in December of that year, Dame Sally Davis, England's then medical chief officer, had suggested the health service would struggle to cope. We've just had in the UK a 3-day exercise on a flu pandemic that killed a lot of people. It became clear that we could not cope with the excess bodies, for instance. It becomes very worrying about the deaths and what that will do to society as you start to get all those deaths, including the economic impact, Davis said at the time. Ministers have been accused of being slow to appreciate the threat from coronavirus, although at the time of the exercise, pandemic flu had been recognised by government to be the most serious emergency threat likely to face the UK. Although reports first surfaced that new infectious disease had emerged in Wuhan, China, at the turn of the year, it was not until mid-March that the crisis measures began to be implemented in the UK. In the days that followed, Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary, issued an appeal to the private sector to build more ventilators, while attempts were made to increase the UK's testing capability. A lockdown under which non-essential workers were urged to stay at home was announced on the 24th of March. Cygnus was set 7 weeks into a severe pandemic outbreak and was designed to test the NHS's response when its service was being overwhelmed and staff numbers were being depleted because they were falling ill. A report at the weekend in the Sunday Telegraph said that Cygnus identified that the NHS would need thousands more intensive care beds in a pandemic crisis, that doctors would have to start triaging patients, only helping those with a better chance of survival, and there would be a shortage of masks and other protective equipment available to frontline staff. A board paper for NHS England appeared to acknowledge that the exercise had revealed critical shortcomings, including plans are currently being revised to incorporate the learning from this exercise and to ensure that our continued preparedness for future pandemic influenza outbreaks. Philip Lee, a former Conservative MP who subsequently defected to the Lib Dems, said earlier this week that he had participated in the 2016 exercise when he was a junior minister at the Ministry of Justice. Ministers had to decide what to do as the overwhelming scale of the pandemic became apparent, he wrote. But the former MP, who trained as a doctor, said that he believed the opportunity to prepare properly for a pandemic had been missed. Serious questions need to be asked of the ministers and civil servants responsible for acting on the findings of that 2016 exercise. The Department of Health said that it had learned lessons from Exercise Cygnus, but would not agree to publishing the document or say what those lessons were. As the public would expect, we regularly test our pandemic plans, and what we learned from previous exercises has helped us to rapidly respond to COVID-19, a spokesperson said today. Now, Chris, here's the thing. We started our preparedness in Scotland a little bit earlier, but what do you think? We've been reporting on COVID virus since January. And I think we've done other reports too, but and apparently there's been a major report from Belarus as well. So there has been an awful lot of information available. The British government, do we believe that they have actually learned this lesson, Chris, from 2016?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, Gordon, because I remember back Kenny done full expose with, I can't remember the chap's name. I think it was Rudenka or something like that.
That's right, Victor Rudenka.
Victor Rudenka. But Kenny done a full hour discussing the whole issue and what was possibly on the horizon. But you know what I'm taken out of are suppressing. I've got to ask: are we that surprised? You know, because it goes back again to what I was talking about earlier in the programme about transparency, and here again we see that the government are willfully trying to hide the findings on a certain issue.
Yeah, Chris, can I just say that, I mean, the Broadcasting Scotland have been kind of at the cutting edge of this with the Rudenka interview. And he, of course, was present in Wuhan at the initial outbreak. There was nobody better, really, to advise Scottish health ministers on what to do. And we're not seeing that from the same depth of journalism from what you might call the mainstream media in the UK.
Well, I mean, that's exactly what I've been, saying all along. If you look on my Twitter feed, before I come on, I put a tweet out saying, now that you've watched the mainstream media, why don't you watch an alternative news channel that gives, a Scottish perspective on today's, political issues? And it's not just down to an insular look at Scotland and independence and all of this. But since I've been on this program, I have spoke about subjects that I never thought could be, nobody would discuss with me at a branch meeting or anything like that. So I mean, broadcast Scotland is highlighting international issues. And they're finding out people who are knowledgeable in the subject and actually talking about this when the mainstream media are kind of like dismissing it and putting it on the back burner.
Well, it seems that, Chris, the level of journalism in the mainstream media seems to be a bit kind of lax. But anyway, listen, speaking of international events that connect back to Scotland, this is a strange one, Chris. This is also linked to the coronavirus, and it appears that hackers working in the interests of the Iranian government have attempted to break into the personal email accounts of staff at the World Health Organization during the coronavirus outbreak. 4 people with knowledge of the matter have told Reuters it's not clear whose accounts were compromised, but the attacks show that the WHO and other organisations at the centre of the global effort to contain the virus have come under sustained digital bombardment by hackers seeking information about the outbreak. Reports first appeared in March that hacking attempts against the United Nations Health Agency and its partners had more than doubled since the beginning of the coronavirus crisis, which has now killed 47,000 people worldwide. The latest effort had been ongoing since March the 2nd and attempted to steal the passwords of WHO staff by sending malicious messages designed to mimic Google web services to their personal email accounts, a common hacking technique known as phishing, according to 4 people briefed on the attacks. Reuters confirmed their findings by reviewing a string of malicious websites and other forensic data. We've seen some targeting by what looks like Iranian government-backed attackers targeting international health organizations generally via phishing, said one of the sources, who works for a large technology company which monitors internet traffic for malicious cyber activity. The WHO spokesman Tarek Jarisevich confirmed that personal email accounts of WHO staff were being targeted by phishing attacks, but said that the WHO did not know who was responsible. To the best of our knowledge, none of these hacking attempts were successful, he said. Iran's government denied any involvement. These are all sheer lies to put more pressure on Iran, said a spokesman at Iran's Information Technology Ministry. Iran has been a victim of hacking. Karim Hijazi, the chief executive of cyber intelligence firm Prevalion, recently shared his recently captured data with Reuters, which shows a sophisticated hacking group was actively targeting the Global Health Organization. Reuters couldn't independently confirm his analysis. Hijazi said the identity of the hackers was difficult to determine. Although their techniques appeared advanced, the intrusion attempts are distinct from others reported last week, which sources said were thought to be the work of an advanced group of hackers known as Dark Hotel that had previously been active in East Asia, an area that has been particularly affected by the coronavirus. The motives of the hackers were not clear, but targeting officials at their personal accounts is a long-standing intelligence gathering technique. Iran has suffered enormous loss of life from the coronavirus, and infections have reached the inner circle of the country's leadership. A person close to US intelligence said that he was aware of the Iranian campaign and that such attacks were standard fare during times of international crisis. While large prizes for intelligence agencies would include coronavirus response plans for various countries of the world of effective treatments, more benign data such as WHO estimates for infection rates would also be valuable, the person said. Chris, this appears to be people looking for inside information on the coronavirus directly from the World Health Organization with perhaps a view to selling that information, or maybe just using it in some way? If it's the Iranian government, why on earth would they be wanting to target the WHO?
Well, first of all, excuse me for coughing there, but I find it hard to believe that the WHO are singling out the Iranian government and accusing them of high-tech sabotage, and not thinking that anyone else could possibly think about doing.
To be fair, Chris, the WHO is not accusing Iran. This is coming from Reuters and one or two experts in the field. But I think we can be relatively confident that Iran is backing the hackers. But the question really is, what they hope to gain from this?
Very fine, fair and well to say that Iran are actually doing it, and you know, it's you could also level the charge at Russia. They've got a proven track record of
that's probably true, Chris. Yeah,
dark closets for.
They may want. Yeah, do you think they might want to use genuine Chris, do you think they might want to use the genuine information first of all, so that they can work out plausible misinformation to put out to confuse and cause trouble in the West?
Well, yeah. The one point that I took from that piece that you were reading out there, Gordon, was that they were saying that you know, what is the possible benefits from actually phishing these various accounts.
I guess it's just intelligence, Chris.
Be absolutely enormous financially and you know, economically towards destabilizing, you know, any other country that's trying to, you know, suppress the Iranian government.
Chris, I'm going to.
I would possibly say that every regime has got a certain vested interest in accessing these figures. And while I'm no great fan of the Iranian government, you know, I think that it would have been fairer to say that, you know, it's not, although they have identified Iran as being the sole perpetrator, it would be fair to say that others, you know,
not the sole perpetrator, but maybe one of them.
Not going to fight as well, you know.
Okay, Chris, we're going to move on to our next story now. We're still on the subject of coronavirus, I'm afraid, but this time a little bit of good news, I think, and that is that Disclosure Scotland is scrapping all the fees for key workers and volunteers who are being drafted in to help Scotland fight against the coronavirus. This is a temporary measure which will be in place for an initial period of 6 weeks before being reviewed and extended further if needed. As thousands of people across the country offer their support, this move will alleviate the financial pressures on those who need a disclosure to avoid unnecessary administrative burdens and to stop any delays caused by payment issues. The list of key workers and key volunteer roles are healthcare, pharmaceutical, childcare, social work, social care, prisons and justice. So you can see the situation develops and evolves. A list of prioritised sectors may change as Disclosure Scotland identifies other sectors with roles critical to supporting the Scottish Government during the crisis. In addition, Disclosure Scotland has already put a number of temporary measures in place to ensure the country can be properly resourced to tackle the COVID-19 virus, including only processing applications for workers deemed critical to helping the nation overcome the virus. Disclosure Scotland is working closely with colleagues at NHS, COSLA and the social care sector to understand exactly what is needed at this time. A Minister for Children and Young People, Marie Todd, said, Disclosure Scotland is responsible for safeguarding the country's children and vulnerable adults, and it's important that even at a time like this, that their vital work continues. Temporarily removing disclosure fees in a crisis has never been done before, but the Scottish Government is committed to making it as easy as possible to get vital workers to where they are needed most. So, Chris, this seems like a good news story that the fact-checking agency, I think you might call it, people who check people's backgrounds before allowing them to work with vulnerable and young people are waiving their fees. So people will still be checked, it seems, but they're not going to have to go through the rigmarole of having to pay and wait for payment to go through before receiving their disclosure certificates.
Yeah, well, you know, anything that's going to save on the cost to the actual person, I think is to be welcomed and lauded, of course. You know, I mean, you can only take the camel so far to the well before it starts to drink. You know, and I'm making reference to the fact that the government have asked for volunteers in order to aid the fight against COVID-19, and an awful lot of people, you know, can't afford the initial
fees,
like setup costs, such as what you have to pay for a PVG disclosure.
I know myself, Chris. In my job, I have to have an official clearance from Disclosure Scotland. That has to be renewed regularly. So I'm aware of the hassles of that. Anyway, Chris, before I don't want to get bogged down in this subject too long, because the next item I think is particularly interesting. That is the SNP has called for an urgent UK summit of energy and telecoms providers to help households who are struggling to pay their utility bills due to the virus. Ian Blackford MP has written to party leaders urging the UK government and opposition parties to get around the table with the utilities companies to ensure that households have the support they need as unemployment rises, incomes are reduced and utility costs and usage increase. The SNP Westminster leader is proposing a number of measures to stop people having their utilities cut off or getting into unmanageable debt, including an emergency coronavirus energy grant to support households struggling to pay their energy bills and to prevent them from accruing unmanageable debts. Also, a 6-month reprieve on utilities being cut off to prevent struggling households from losing access to energy and telecoms utilities during the crisis. And also a freeze on prices and a package of measures to keep costs manageable, including flat rate telephone calls and landline charges suspended during the day to help people to stay in touch with their families and loved ones. Commenting, the SNP Westminster leader Ian Blackford said, "This is a deeply worrying time for us all, but absolutely no one should be left struggling to heat their home or to keep in touch with their families during this unprecedented emergency. Household bills and utility usage are going up at a time that millions of people are seeing a reduction or a complete loss of their income. Many are concerned that they'll be unable to pay and worried that they'll be cut off or left with unmanageable debts. The SNP is calling on the UK government to ensure a package of measures to help struggling households, including a new emergency coronavirus energy grant to help pay the bills, a freeze on prices, and a 6-month reprieve on utilities being cut off to prevent anyone from losing access during the crisis. The UK government must get round the table with the opposition parties, energy and telecoms providers, so that people can get the help that they need and that no one is left behind." I think, Chris, this is an excellent idea. What's your opinion of this one?
Well, of course, it's an excellent idea, and obviously it takes a progressive, grown-up party to come out with a policy such as this. I could honestly wax lyrical about this.
Okay.
Evening,
Chris,
you know, I mean, this is all about mucking in. It's all about social justice for the people who are struggling financially. It's whether or not the Tories are willing to speak to.
Okay, Chris, we've got an awful lot more. Chris, there's a lot more related to this, which I'm just going to come to just now, so we can move on a little bit. The Chancellor today has been urged to strengthen welfare protections. The SNP has renewed calls on the UK government to strengthen welfare protections after new figures revealed that almost 1 million people had applied for universal credit in the last fortnight. Neil Gray MP said the current system of universal credit was not generous or flexible enough to properly support the millions of people that need help amid the virus. SNP Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary repeated calls on the UK government to use the tax and welfare system to boost support and ensure that no one is left behind by introducing a guaranteed minimum income for everyone. The SNP has also called on the UK government to make universal credit more responsive to people's needs, including by introducing immediate upfront payment, extending the backdating of benefits and relaxing the criteria, removing the capital tariff reduction for those with savings, and removing the shared accommodation rate from local housing allowance. So, Chris, a lot in this at the moment, but basically we come back to this idea of a basic income for everybody. And I myself have had trouble trying to get universal credit because of savings, and this is something that annoys people who've been careful and saved money over the years for their children's futures and things like that, being told they can't get universal credit because they have savings over £16,000.
Yeah, you're very correct, and this also highlights the inequality surrounding the whole UK benefit system, which is designed not to who have what the Tory party wanted people to do back in the 80s and the 90s, and be upwardly mobile and be self-sufficient.
One of the things, Chris, I think that we need to point out is that if you save money, say, on behalf of your children, you might put that into a trust fund or an ISA that you can't get access to for years. So that money is not a liquid asset. So the universal credit people need to take into account that sometimes you might appear to have money on paper, but it's money that's earmarked specifically for a trust fund for a child or something like that, and you cannot get any access to that at all to spend it.
Oh, exactly, and this is where it falls down for the Tories, because and I go back to what I was saying earlier on, and it even goes back to the days of Thatcher, where she was enticing everybody to buy into the housing market, and the whole ethos of work till you drop, and and save all your money and put things into government bonds and whatnot, what have you, and everything will be ticking to boot, and you will move up the economic scale from working class to middle class.
Chris, I need to stop you at this point because we've got a number of items to rattle through here. They're all related to one another. This next one is really come up. It's exactly up my street. This one, the SNP has renewed calls for the UK government to deliver additional support for the self-employed after the Institute for Fiscal Studies warned that millions of self-employed people would fall through the gaps in the UK government's proposals. New analysis from the IFS shows that around 2 million people with self-employment income will not be eligible to have it covered by the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme, and that almost half of the self-employed would see their family income fall by at least 40% in the short run if their work has dried up before these grants are paid in June. A quarter of self-employed people earning less than £50,000 a year don't have enough liquid assets between themselves and any partner to cover 3 months' lost earnings, and 15% don't have enough cover for a single month. Ian Blackford has said that the UK government's support for the self-employed fails to match Boris Johnson's pledge to deliver parity. So what do we think, Chris? Has Boris Johnson done enough, or is there more that he should be doing?
Well, I mean, obviously there's more to that should be done. I mean, this just highlights how the Tory party. Well, even actually, I would mention the Labour Party as well. But the UK governments as a whole in the past have systematically slashed at benefit support, and the whole idea of the whole idea of benefits are there to cradle you until you can stand on your own 2 feet. Now, yes, there are going to be an element of wasters and footpads and strays that are going to leach off of the system. That's only about, in the grand scheme of things, 2% of the actual workforce.
It's not, Chris, actually it's less than that. I remember seeing figures that only about 0.7% of benefit claimants did anything fraudulent. You know, so there wasn't this mass misbehaviour of benefit claimants at all that the government seemed to be indicating.
No. I mean, you and I, Gordon, are of an age where you know, our parents brought you up with a can-do work ethic, and if you had to, you know, if you wanted cash money in your pocket to spend at the weekend, you had to put a certain amount of graft in for that.
Yeah.
In order to do it, you know, and nowadays things are too readily available, and you know,
so it's been an age of instant gratification, hasn't it, Chris? I'm just going to move us to our next story now. This is another interesting one. The SNP again, this time has pressed the Chancellor to urgently step in to ensure that small and medium enterprises have access to desperately needed finance now to protect them from going out of business. The renewed calls come after reports today that Rishi Sunak is set to revisit the UK government's coronavirus business interruption loan scheme to look to remove the requirement for banks to first assess whether small and medium enterprises are eligible for other lending options. However, SNP Shadow Chancellor Alison Thewlis MP warned that the proposed move does not go far enough to safeguard SMEs who are struggling to stay afloat now and who face delays and barriers in accessing the UK government schemes. Research published yesterday revealed that a fifth of small and medium-sized UK businesses are unlikely to get the cash they need to survive in the next 4 weeks due to those restrictions. The Shadow Chancellor, Alison Thewlis MP, said any changes to the UK government's interruption loan scheme to help SMEs is to be welcomed. However, the proposed U-turn does not go far enough to address the serious concerns raised by small and medium businesses. The SNP has been repeatedly calling for measures to effectively support small and medium businesses across the UK, who through no fault of their own are in an extremely challenging environment, including plans to look at more grants as well as loans, to reflect the fact that businesses are losing income, not just seeing it deferred. Now, I know, Chris, because I run a small business, that when your cash flow dries up, then your business is basically, it dies, because you can't continue to operate unless you have money flowing through your business accounts.
Yeah.
And this, it seems to me, is more pressure on the government to do something about that, to do it now.
Listen, if the Tory party are saying that they're the party of business, then you know they have to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. So they have to put their money where their mouth is, and they have to support small business. I too think, I know you're going to laugh at this, Gordon, but you know, in a previous life, and I've done many things in my life, but I had my own aerial and satellite company, and you know, so I know all about profit and loss. I'm fully versed in having a running profit so that I can buy stock and you know, and pay for the MOT on the van and the monthly road tax and all the rest of it. So but it's unfortunate the fact that the people on the front benches of the Tory party are not used to running SMEs.
No, they're the party of big business, aren't they, Chris?
and they have other people, in
But
order
they're
to.
also, Chris, forgive me interrupting, but the Conservative Party is also the party of big business. It's not the party of the shopkeepers and the barber shops and the window cleaners, is it?
Oh, no, and that's despite back in time when Napoleon Bonaparte famously said that Britain was a nation of shopkeepers.
Well, it's not far wrong.
No, he wasn't far wrong, but no, you're completely right. That they are in the market for big business. But they're not counting, three or possibly four-figure sums.
Yeah.
They're counting 10-figure sums.
Yeah.
Sometimes 15-figure sums.
Chris, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut across you again here. We've got such a packed show tonight. I've got another story for you here. This is an odd one as well. The European Court has ruled that 3 member states broke the law over refugee quotas. Poland, Hungary and the Czech Republic broke European law when they failed to give refuge to asylum seekers arriving in southern Europe, often having fled the war in Syria and Iraq, the EU's top court has ruled. 3 Central European countries now face possible fines for refusing to take a share of refugees after EU leaders forced through mandatory quotas to relocate up to 160,000 asylum seekers at the height of the 2015 migration crisis. The Court of Justice said that 3 member states had failed to fulfil their obligations under European Union law. The Czech Republic took in just 12 asylum seekers, whilst Hungary and Poland refused to take a single person. The court rejected the legal argument of Hungary, Poland and Czech Republic were entitled to disregard EU law in order to maintain public safety, law and order. None of the countries had proved that it was necessary to invoke opt-out clause in the EU treaties, the court concluded. The European Commission are now entitled to embark on legal action to impose fines on the 3 member states. Chris, this is another strange one. I mean, this goes back to 2015, the height of the refugee crisis during the Syrian war when it was at its height. And of course, refugees were flooding the European Union. And the European Union took steps to try to disperse them more evenly across the EU's countries. And these 3 states just point blank refused. And Britain did as well, now that I think about it.
Sorry.
Britain also didn't comply with this either, if I remember correctly.
Actually, and thank you for making that point, Gordon. And I'm so glad that this has actually come up on the items to be discussed. As you know, I've got a vested interest as a NGO. I do humanitarian work to France and Belgium, and it's actually indicative of these governments not to participate in the scheme markedly after they had agreed to the EU's proposals. And what we're now seeing is that, and I seriously hope that Britain does get hit with a fine, because you know, Scotland has argued from day one that we are in desperate need of inward migration, and yet we see that another government is overruling Scotland by basically massaging the figures and not allowing the quota of migrants that I agreed to allow in to be dispersed throughout the British Isles, not just in the southeast.
Of course not. Yeah.
And what I'm trying to highlight here, the common thread between Britain, Poland, and the Czech Republic is the fact that they've all got of protectionism. They've got an ideology of protectionism that you know smacks of right-wing racism. You know, it's absolutely. You've highlighted this.
Well, listen, Chris, I was stopping you just to remind you that, of course, at 8 o'clock, everybody will be clapping for the NHS. This is the second such event that's being staged nationally. So in about half a minute's time, we're all going to be asked to clap again, stand at the front door. I can see Chris is getting ready to stand at either his window. Where are you, Chris? Okay, we have 15 seconds to go, everyone. So if you get ready, get to your front door or your front windows, stand outside. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Right, Chris, you can clap now.
Well, I can't clap and hold a laptop at the same time. My neighbour across the road there's clapping.
Okay. We should get a shot of your neighbour, Chris.
And we've got bagpipe.
Yeah, you get it on your phone there.
Well, I can't pick up everything at the one time.
Okay. You're looking good there, Chris. Thanks for that.
It's an absolute pleasure. It's really nice to see people out at the streets and stuff like that.
Chris, turn your camera around, Chris, so we can see. That's better. Say hello to your street from us, Chris. Tell them thanks for broadcasting Scotland. Okay, Chris, you still with us? Okay, listen, we're about to wind the show up, Chris. You need to get back indoors now.
I think the bagpipes are a real good touch, actually. Fair play to them.
Fantastic, Chris. Thank you. Well, listen, we are just about out of time for this evening. Now, we've got one story left to do, Chris. So when you're sitting comfortably again, we can do this last story before we go tonight. Are you comfortable there, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay, this one struck me as a very odd story, but then again, maybe not. It's just struck me as a strange one. Anyway, an MSP has backed a campaign for home safety during the coronavirus. MSP Claire Adamson has backed a new campaign aimed at preventing avoidable accidents in the home to ease pressure on the NHS during the COVID-19 outbreak. As a majority of Scots stay at home in line with government guidance, it's vital that people take precautions to create a safe home environment and to avoid accidental injury. The new campaign, Accident Free Avoid A&E, led by the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents, or ROSPA, highlights that more accidents happen in the home than anywhere else. The campaign's central message emphasises the need to reduce preventable accidents and to help frontline health services to prevent accidents, protect your family and to help the NHS. ROSPA hopes to draw attention to some common dangers in the home. For example, trampolines are one of the most frequent causes of A&E attendances, posing a particular risk to children. Ms Adamson, who is the convener of the Parliament's cross-party group on accident prevention and safety awareness, noted that practical information outlined by the campaign, with guidance for older people and children, tips for setting up a safe workspace, DIY risks and fire safety advice, amongst other things. The SNP MSP for Motherwell and Wishaw said, "The most important thing we can do to help our NHS right now is to stay at home. But as we adapt to this new way of living during the outbreak, we must be particularly careful to avoid injury that will place undue pressure on our public health service at a time when it's faced with global health crises. Small steps can prevent accidents in the home, and this will enable crucial frontline health workers to deal with the influx of patients due to the pandemic. All too often, the safety community hears that parents and carers were unaware of some of the steps we can all take to keep our homes safe." ROSPA's new campaign provides simple and useful resources for creating a safe home environment. Ensuring that the NHS has the capacity to treat those who need it most will be critical as we navigate one of the most challenging periods in living memory. Now more than ever, as all of us are at home, proactive approach to safety will help our amazing NHS as they fight to overcome this virus. Although individual responsibility and collective effort, we will beat this. Elizabeth Lumsden, the Community Safety Manager at ROSPA Scotland, said, as a part of its campaign, ROSPA has compiled a useful list of safety tips and wellbeing suggestions, which can be accessed at www.rospa.com/accident-free. There is some potentially invaluable information, such as tips for older people to avoid falls and exercises that people can do so that they're able to get up from a fall if they have the one and they're on their own. There's a wealth of information available from organisations across the safety community. We are urging people to be safety conscious. Our NHS does so much to support us, and we must support it in return. I think wise words there. Chris, I can't think that there's anything in that message to disagree with.
Well, no, there is not. And again, it's actually highlighting something that an awful lot of households overlook, and that is health and safety. You know, there's so many fires caused by people leaving their mobile phone chargers, you know, plugged into the wall with the switch on, you know, tongs, hair tongs and curler tongs. And,
yeah,
you know,
we have so many gadgets, Chris, don't we?
Yeah, and it's something that you have to be aware of, and I can see.
I think the one about trampolines is actually a very good one. Most of my next door neighbours have trampolines in their gardens, and the kids are on them virtually all day sometimes, you know.
Well, actually, I can hark back to when my eldest son, he's 25 now, he actually broke his ankle on a trampoline when he was 12. And that laid him up for at least about 2.5 months. You know, so I mean, I know only too well the drawbacks of spending that £99.99 in B&Q in order to shut the children up.
Well, Chris, I'm going back to my own house now to be a bit more careful, having just heard that. Anyway, that is our last story for tonight, and thanks very much, Chris, for leading the clap on your street as well.
No problem.
That's about it from us at Scotland at 7 this evening. I'll be back again on Monday with another show at 7 o'clock. In the meantime, it just remains for me to thank Chris McCusker for being our wingman tonight. Thanks again, Chris.
No problem.
We'll see you next week if you're spared. Okay. And from me on this Thursday night, that's it from Scotland at 7. As usual, if you would like to support Broadcasting Scotland, you can do so by following the on-screen instructions by going to broadcastingscotland.scot/register. I'll be back again on Monday, but from all of us here at the Scotland at 7 studio, it's a very good night to you.